Betsy is the past director of preserves and programs at the Little River Wetlands Project, the land trust that manages Eagle Marsh. Betsy's currently, as of January 1, on the advisory board for the organization. She is a certified ecological restoration practitioner with the Society of Ecological Restoration and assists with the global newsletter for that program. Even has a really cool bracket that goes with that. No, I'm just teasing. I don't know. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Geology from Indiana University, a graduate certificate in Fire Ecology, Management and Technology, and a graduate degree in Integrated Natural Resources Management from the University of Idaho. She's been a wildland firefighter type 2 since 2017. Betsy teaches ecology at Indiana Tech University. With a group of dedicated volunteers in 2017, Betty initiated the Northeast chapter of our beloved organization, Indiana Native Plant Society, as the founding president. And she's currently active with Indiana Native Plant Conservation Alliance. With that, take it away, Betsy.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I forgot I said all that stuff. So you guys now know me very well. Feel free, you can, during the presentation, raise your hand, or if there's anything that you want me to slow down on or explain further. But we're going to go ahead and start off with the geology, and then we're going to add the people history, so you can kind of understand the why, why are we working in this area? And then we'll move right into the how and, boots on the ground. I'll go through tons of pictures of what that restoration and all the efforts from volunteers and professionals to get the restoration off the ground. I did have to cut out a lot of my Asian Carp Project slides. So for those that were able to attend that hike at Eagle Marsh for the annual conference, if you want to follow up stuff at the end of the presentation, we can talk more, but I did have to cut a lot of that out. So moving on. So let me go ahead and see if my PowerPoint will move forward. Okay. All right, so you guys already learned all about me. So the Little River Wetlands Project is a non-for-profit organization, land trust in Northeast Indiana. The project started in 1990, and they protect over 1,300 acres and serve about 11,000 people every year with free wetland education programs. And so I'm very honored that I was able to go ahead and present on behalf of this group tonight to discuss the really important project called Eagle Marsh. Eagle Marsh is 831 acres. The project acquired it in 2005. And what is unique about this property in the state of Indiana is that Little River Wetlands Project is a 50% owner and the DNR is 50% owner. So there are not many properties in the entire state where the state is 50% landowners with any other entity. There are a couple instances, but Eagle Marsh happens to be one of those. And then most of the property is covered with an NRCS Wetland Reserve Program easement. And that was enrolled there in 2005. So the wetland restoration, because Eagle Marsh is so big and so complex, the wetland restoration took 3 years to complete at the marsh. But if you're in restoration, the restoration is never complete. But I love these pictures because that is an image of Eagle Marsh when we first started in 2005. And you can see it's a flooded farm field. And then just in 10 years, that's the picture at the bottom. You can see the diversity of textures and structure and species that are there using that property. One moment. All right, so that is Eagle Marsh in a nutshell. So, you know, the story always kind of begins with the geologic history. So, about 400 million years ago, Indiana was covered by a vast inland sea. You guys may already know about this during the Silurian age. Warm and shallow the sea was, and it harbored many species of marine life. At this time, North America was near the equator. And I always love this image. Obviously, you know, there you got to take some of it into consideration, but you know, all of these different areas, sorry, around the planet have been moving around. So it's interesting for us to consider the fact that Indiana was near the equator at some point in our geologic history, at the time that our bedrock was forming. And so here is kind of some information about the limestone. And one of the cool things about this inland sea is that we had these reef systems that formed. And so with the reef systems, that's where our limestone comes from. So you can see different fossils located that in this bedrock at our in Indiana, and especially in northern Indiana. So, you know, so we had lots of years erased because, you know, the bedrock that we have is Silurian or Devonian in age. But also, an ancient river system used to exist in this part of the country. So I always like thinking about this as well. So, sorry. I was hoping to use my cursor, and it won't let me use my cursor. All right. So the Taze River began in North Carolina, you can see, and it drained up through Ohio, through the mid part of Indiana, and then down through Illinois. And you can see the Gulf of Mexico right there at the edge of Illinois at the southern border. If you didn't know, over time it's filled in and migrated south. And so that's always something cool. You can look that up if you want to Google that on your own. But part of the Taze River Valley is now the Wabash River follows parts of that through central Indiana. And so there's actually oil deposits underneath the in the Tay River Valley that's now underneath the Wabash River. So that's some cool stuff. So anyways, I could talk nerdy geology all day long. And all this river system was active until glaciers, right? So for the past 1 to 2 million years, we've been in an ice age, even though I don't know when geologists will say we're done with that ice age, right? Or if it's already come to pass. But it had worldwide effects. The entire northern Indiana was covered multiple times with different lobes coming, you know, down and scraping and then retreating, then coming back because of the heating and cooling during that time. So this was really cool. The Taze River was dammed and glacial deposits were buried into Pipe Creek sinkhole. And so if you don't know about this geologic site, it's really cool. Camels and saber-tooth tigers and lots of really wonderful fossils found in this. And this is near Fairmont, Indiana. So this is a map that you guys have probably seen a lot. So that just shows kind of the extent that the glaciers came down and then retreated over time. The one area that I would love for you guys to focus on is this glacial Lake Maumee. So glacial Lake Maumee was the precursor to Lake Erie, and how glacial Lake Maumee went away and all of that is the next part of our discussion. But the neat thing is that you can kind of see glacial Lake Maumee did drain into the Wabash River historically, following the Old Taze River Valley and then further south. So what was neat though is that this is one of my favorite maps of Indiana, just because I love looking at these concentric circles. And basically what you have to do is dream that that is a glacier retreating over time, right? Because when the glacier's melting, sand and gravel are able to like roll off and deposit right along the margin of that glacier. And so that's what you're seeing right here. These are the margins of the glacier during times of, melt and all that deposition occurring. And you guys probably know what those big hills of debris are called: moraines. And so there's a number of moraines in the system: the Mississinewa, the Salamone, the Wabash, and then this one right here is called the Fort Wayne moraine. And then as you go away, you can kind of see it's this big flat region right here. And that's the old lake bed of Lake Maumee. And so Lake Maumee, so for a long time, Fort Wayne was a port city on one of the major Great Lakes, glacial Great Lakes. And something occurred, right? Something happened to why that Great Lake is not here. And that was a breach through this moraine, this Fort Wayne moraine right here. Basically, it was like a natural levee holding back that glacial lake. And for some reason, maybe 12 to 14,000 years ago, that natural levee failed. And so that glacial meltwater was able to rush out of that lake. And you can see boulders all the way at Lafayette. If you go down 24, you'll see like there's these huge boulders in farm fields. Those boulders were from this torrent. It was called the Maumee Torrent, or now the Maumee Mega Flood. And so it was a lot of energy and drained a significant amount of Lake Maumee. And so that drew back that lake to pretty much present day Lake Erie. And so in between present day Lake Erie and now, this area here that we know as Fort Wayne, between these two areas, that old lake bottom filled in with swamp, right? And so that became the Black Swamp. And then over this Continental Divide, because over time the Maumee River went ahead and pirated the St. Mary's. I'll show you these here in just a second, a little bit more up to date. But there was an act of piracy, and so instead of the water flowing historically down to the Wabash, it then started to drain towards Lake Erie, and that effectively created the Continental Divide right here along the edge of this Fort Wayne moraine. And so if you haven't ever had a chance to go to Tony Fleming, one of his presentations, he is phenomenal, and he is the artist on this next group of slides to kind of show a little bit more up close about how this all happened. So here's that, Fort Wayne moraine here. And you can see the St. Mary's River is nestled right next to it. And then also the St. Joe coming from the north. And the St. Mary's and St. Joseph historically entered the Wabash River. And so that glacial meltwater started to create this valley that we'll come to know as the Little River Valley. And then as we can see here, we started having these sags. So the over time, the two areas in that moraine started to weaken. And you can see, instead of it being a glacier, now we have glacial Lake Maumee. And then that levee, that natural levee failed. It kind of acted like somebody pulling the plug out of the bathtub. And there's actually two locations that water started to pour through that Maumee Torrent or mega flood down through the city of Huntington, like I said, and all the way out to West Lafayette. So that was a major change in the geology and where rivers were flowing in our area. And then all that water just, went away, and then all of this area started to drain into, very sorry about this, into this waterway. And so instead of it being, a whole valley filled with water, all of a sudden it is now just a trickle, because most of the flood water has dissipated, and now it's just the area around it draining into it. So that is why when the French arrived, they called it Petite Riviera, because it was a very large river, channel with a very tiny river. So anyway, so over time, there's still a lot of water because when the torrent came through, it cut the valley about 80 feet deep. And so eventually all the area around it started draining to the lowest spot. And so water started draining into the low area. But there wasn't a lot of flow. There wasn't a lot of elevation difference. So it formed 25,000 acres of wetland. And then something cool that happened about 7,000 years ago, the valley dried up and there was wind. And so right along the southern edge of the valley, there is a dune field. And so there's a number of dunes in the system, starting at the LC Nature Park, if you've ever had the opportunity to visit that place. Fox Island is called an island because it is a forested sand dune surrounded by forest. So like an island, surrounded by wetlands. So yeah, super cool. So there's a number of dunes in this system. Yep. And then over time, instead of the water draining to the Wabash River, we had a stream piracy. Maumee River ended up capturing the St. Joseph and the St. Mary's River, and that flow started then off to Lake Erie and creating this modern continental divide. All right. So kind of to see what does that valley look like on satellite? Killing me. So it starts here in Fort Wayne. You can see in a very, very urban area, and it stretches down past Roanoke and then on to the city of Huntington. Yep. And what's curious is right here, the valley was very wide. It looks like pretty wide. And then it gets to a very, very skinny channel just before, as it goes to the city of Huntington. During the ditching and draining of the marsh, that last 6 miles had to be blasted out, and the limestone had to be removed to finally drain the wetland. So this is what it looks like if you are into watersheds and watershed maps. So this is the great watershed of the Little River river, and then there's 3 sub-watersheds, and then the valley that kind of snakes through the middle of it. There are 2 areas, right? Like I mentioned, this area here was not part of the original wetland. It had to be blasted through. And the part up here, how do you have the valley that's not inside the watershed anymore? Well, this area is actually much larger, an area that had historically drained before we started ditching and draining the area. So yeah, the Great Marsh, beautiful. People called it like a desolate wetland or wasteland because you couldn't do anything with it, right? It was just wetlands when settlers first arrived. Hopefully over time we've changed attitudes towards wetlands. But yeah, so it was 25,000 acres, and you would have, it was kind of like a slow moving wetland. So people were able to put their canoes into these channels, and sometimes it'd be like one channel, and then sometimes it'd finger out to many channels, then come back to a main channel. So it was just a slow meandering waterway from the city of Fort Wayne to the city of Huntington, which didn't become, I mean, it was an essential travel area to connect the Great Lakes watersheds with the Mississippi watershed and the Wabash River in the city of Huntington. So that's why, why the fort was established, right? So moving right on to Eagle Marsh and kind of what the maps look like back in 1783 when the French came in and started mapping these areas. And so you can kind of see the Great Lakes and Lake Erie, and kind of where Eagle Marsh is located is right here, right in the middle of these waterways, and some of the roads are starting to become established at this time. And then here is a historic depiction of the Native Americans that lived here at the time, and also the original fort, an image here. or reconstruction. And then Eagle Marsh in 1876. I love this map. So this is the last map before ditching and draining of the Great Marsh. And you can see right here the words marshy prairie. And there is this little dotted line that's through this area. It's too hard to pick up. So, but it covers about 7,000 acres in southwest Allen County and labels it marshy prairie. You can also see through here, here's the Wabash Erie Canal that's running right along the edge of the valley. And also the Little River is right here. And it actually, actually started in Ossian and came north. But this is the last map that we have of the area with its natural drainage. And so it's something that as you move into restoration and you move into like, how do we bring back what the most of what was here? You know, here are the different things that you kind of think of: the past geology, the soil types, which come from your geology, and also the drainage. How did water move throughout the landscape and form the different landforms that we have today? There's also the train runs right through, the train tracks run right through the middle of that valley. I do have a little nerd knowledge too. Oh, I can show it here better on a map, the next map. But there's where Eagle Marsh is located in this map. So then I love it because we can start moving to aerial photographs in 1938. And you can kind of see we do have the metropolis of Fort Wayne here. But out here, we have lots and lots of farmland still. And so that is where Eagle Marsh is located in 1938, or what will become Eagle Marsh. And then the next one is 1964. So you can see right here is the interstate just starting. This is Interstate 69. And here is the junction with 24. So the interesting thing about 24 is that if you look at maps that are old enough, they call US 24 Upper Huntington Road. And so if you're from Fort Wayne, there's a Lower Huntington Road, and the valley is in between those two roads. But that's where Eagle Marsh is located. This is a wonderful picture. If anybody knew Tom Dustin, helped start Acres Land Trust and was very active in Isaac Walton League. He took this picture off when 69 was just being built. And this is in a major flood system. So this is Eagle Marsh to the north of the train tracks that run through the valley. And then this is Fox Island County Park. Well, what would become Fox Island County Park. I wonder if they helped, this image helped make that a county park in those discussions back in the early 70s. And then in 1990, after lots of, you got the Clean Water Act, right? And you have all these wetland laws that have come into place, and the mitigation law that came in 1989. All of a sudden, you know, a group of dedicated people are like, we need to do something for wetlands. And so Little River Wetlands Project is an amazing story because it is a partnership. 4 organizations came together to form one organization to focus on wetlands. So that was Acres Land Trust, Stockbridge Audubon, Isaac Walton League, and Fox Island Fox Island Alliance. So they all sent board members to form this group, and that partnership began. So we moved right into wetland first educations, where were Little River cleanups. And then we started purchasing land in the valley to start restoring back into habitat. But then the rains came. And so this is really the origin story of Eagle Marsh. And I think it's something to talk about as we talk about climate change and these increased precipitation events. So in 2020 or 2002, we had a major flash flood that occurred in southwest Allen County. As much as 8 inches of rain fell right over the location of Eagle Marsh. And so this was in June. And so the farmers in the area in this lowland had significant crop loss. And then the very next summer, July 2003, we had another major flood. Folks that know Fort Wayne remember the 1982 flood when Ronald Reagan came and called us the city that saved itself, right? Well, the flood that happened in '03 was 2.5 feet higher than that flood. So it was a huge flood that came through the area and destroyed the crops again. And so the farmer that farmed Eagle Marsh just said, okay, I'm done. This place wants to be back, go back to a wetland. And that's what we started to do. We started negotiating. This gentleman here, if you don't know him, he's Paul McAfee. Paul McAfee was instrumental in the creation of the marsh and getting the land set aside for restoration. And so this is us taking ownership of it. Of course, we couldn't do it unless we had all these partners. So at our 10th anniversary of the purchase, we put this list of get together of donors. But really, it was the partnership with the DNR coming in at 50% landowner and NRCS with their easement. We also had significant funding from the Nature Conservancy. So, yep, here's us signing it on. And then this is what it looked like. And so I like to show this image because it reminds me of soybeans. So, some of the property was soybeans and some of the property was corn. Does that matter when you start a restoration? This is where Zoom calls are hard because, the interaction, like, does it matter? Well, yeah, because when you have all that nitrogen fixation happening there with the soybeans as being a legume, when you put the restoration into that site, it's going to respond a lot better than into the depleted soils where corn crops just came off. And so I know a lot of restoration efforts now include some kind of soil preparation, right? Whether, you try to plant crops that turnips or something to aerate the soil, or try to plant behind soybeans for your restoration. But yeah, so that's Fox Island County Park to the south. So there was so much water at Eagle Marsh, we had to use the farmer had to use ginormous pumps to pump the water out. And so when the farming left, we had, these pumps to deal with. And we wanted the public to show up. So we had a lot of hazards to take care of. So the first thing we had to do at a restoration was go ahead and go through and document all the hazards and all the things that we had on the property. We had, this is just a big open pit well, anybody, and it's covered with reed canary grass. So anybody could fall in at any time. So we had to go through and look at these hazards. This is a catwalk that's probably about 15 inches wide. And that's how they went across the ditch, the farming folks, to go from one side to the other with their irrigation. And so if you have the public here, that's a hazard. And other things in and around our barn, the trash that you would find, there are electrical wires all over the property for pumping, irrigation, pumping water off and also pumping water back in. And so then, yeah, this is us in the beginning, and you go out and you're doing all the different surveying and where your different restoration efforts are going to take care of. You have dedicated folks. You guys might know some of these folks here out trying to figure out what we're going to do now with this large, now harvested Eagle Marsh. Again, you've seen a couple of these pictures, but yeah, it was wet farmland. And so in the initial state of, so this image was taken before any of our restoration efforts occurred. But from 1964, that last aerial, to today, you can see how the city of Fort Wayne has just grown up around this low area and this valley that comes through. And so in the restoration, can we go back to the hydrology that existed naturally before the ditching and draining of the valley in the late 1800s? No, we can't. It's impossible now. There's so much urban influence into the site that there's a lot of things that we had to take into consideration for the restoration. But our volunteers came out, we got a sign in. We had our first open house, because in a restoration, you want to bring your stakeholders in, and the stakeholders are the public. We have like, this is the mayor, you know, all the different folks that you want to bring into your restoration, because if you have stakeholder support, then your project's going to be more successful. You're going to have less complaints. We started our education program. So our ramblers hike every Tuesday morning. They've been hiking every Tuesday morning at our preserve since 2006, except when it's really cold like this week. We also have breakfast on the marsh. It's a seniors program we've been running since 2006, on every second Thursday. So one issue, and this is Tony Fleming again, explaining what the water budget would be. So Tony Fleming's a geologist focusing on hydrology, but basically the water at Eagle Marsh, because when they ditched and drained, they sent the water from the original Little River that came up from Ossian. They sent that to Foster Park and St. Mary's River. And then we have a gravel pit that's just south of us that pumps 3 to 4 million gallons of water out. I mean, it's just so much groundwater is lost through that gravel operation. And so water that used to pour into the valley now is channelized into ditches, farming ditches. And so really, when we're looking at the restoration, Tony estimates it's about 20% of the water that was originally there is now available for us during this restoration. But man, look at that soil. That is some good soil. It's beautiful. And so in a restoration, you have engineering plans. They come in and they do all of the earthwork to make low wetland areas. There might be water control structures. It just depends on your site. Our site has water control structures, ways for the water. This is just a little bit of a lip, and that's a ditch, sorry. Yeah, here's lots of really pretty pictures. Yeah, so this is what, you know, you get your stakes out there, you have earth movers coming in and making shallow water wetlands. So in a wetland restoration, it is, you know, 3 feet of water or less. Sometimes it's as deep as 4, but they try to make it 3 feet of water or less, so you don't have a lot of fish living in it. You don't want a pond, so you can have the amphibians, the frogs, you know, a safe place to lay their eggs without the predation of fish. But fish always get in there no matter what. And then you have the drought that we had over the summer where everything dried up and the fish die. And so then next year we're going to have tons of frogs, because as long as the herons didn't eat all the frogs, because it was really easy eating for the herons because all the frogs were minimized to, you know, little pockets of water. So the fluctuation of life in the marsh is always interesting. All right, so then after you do your earthwork, then you bring in the seeds. We had different seeds, you know, we had many different seed mixes brought in. The NRCS through the Wetland Reserve Program, the older program, you know, only has X amount of dollars per acre. Through foundation support, we were able to add or augment our seed mixes for more seeds per acre, a larger diversity, and some species that we probably couldn't afford, but we're able to bring into the restoration. And so company, you know, bringing in the public dollars, but also the private dollars as well. And then these are the guys that did it. Pheasants Forever. If you don't know about Pheasants Forever, they're a great group that come in and plant prairies, but they also plant wetlands. They have a native seed planter where you have large seeds in one hopper and smaller seeds in another hopper. And then in a wetland restoration, you really only have a little bit of time that you can actually get out there and seed. The snow is a little bit deep here, but basically you need the ground frozen. You can't have more than really like an inch of snow, and it can't be flooded. So really there's like a week or two during the winter where it's good to get heavy equipment out on wetland surfaces, because when it's like this, you start really bogging down. You can already see, the mud starting to collect on these tires. But then you also have volunteer help. And this is when I first started at the marsh, this is what it looked like. Mary now is an EMT, saving lives, and the other girl is in law school. So anyways, great group. This is Don. You guys might remember Don. Russ Voorhees, very active with the Indiana Master Naturalist Program. And then you also have the partnerships through the different utilities. So half of Indiana's utilities run through the middle of the marsh. So we had to come up with a unique strategy to how to work with that problem of this major urban infrastructure through the middle of the restoration. But we did it. We worked a deal out and an MOU out with Indiana Michigan Power. So we're able to work underneath their towers. And this is not a road, it's a berm and it's not for maintenance, but just happens to be under their power lines. And that's how Natural Resources Conservation Service was able to do that, or NRCS. So education is important. So we started installing our first interpretive signs. That catwalk bridge, SDI donated a brand new bridge for us. We expanded. We brought in a nice woodland habitat, about 40 acres. The city, and because of that, the acquisition of those 40 acres, we were able to move our easement for NRCS from this location to that forested wetland behind or south of the barn, so that the city of Fort Wayne could connect the towpath trail to connect Southwest Trails with the city system. So with this 1 mile of trail, connected like 60 miles plus of trails. So it was a really important piece for the city to make this happen. And so, yep, so that's it under construction. What else happened in 2010? 2010, we were notified that we had, a possibility of having Asian carp. And so we had in the summer of 2010, we had Canada was suing the United States, and senators were yelling at each other for Asian carp. So there's just like this huge political dilemma happening. And how did Eagle Marsh get into the middle of it? Well, Eagle Marsh is a pathway for Asian carp to come up the Wabash River, cross over the marsh and flooding situations, and then move into the St. Mary's River. So of all the Great Lakes, Asian carp will cause the most damage to Lake Erie because it's the shallowest. Now, I want you guys to know, why is it the shallowest? Because of the Maumee Torrent, because of the geologic event that carved the valley that we're talking about, right? It drained that Great Lake. And so that's why Lake Erie is much shallower than the rest. Or one of the reasons. There's other reasons too. But anyways, so Asian carp will cause the most damage to Lake Erie, which now has a $7 billion+ fishing industry. So the federal government came through and they put up this really important fence. And this fence went through the middle of the marsh, because the only time they really think Asian carp would be upstream all the way to Eagle Marsh from the Wabash River into the Little River to the marsh would be during a spawning event. And so, long story short, they built this fence. It was called the Carp Fence. John Goss became the Asian Carp Director for the White House. And then in 2013, after this fence came in, we had extreme flooding. If you've ever been to our barn, that is the barn door you walk in. It was completely inaccessible. We came in through canoe. This is water pouring off into the marsh from Engle Road. The ditch was broke through the ditch walls. And so if Asian carp were swimming in the waters here, coming into the marsh, it was definitely possible. Definitely a torrent coming through. And this is water leaving the Wabash watershed and spilling into the Great Lakes watershed along Eagle Road. So the scientists from all the agencies decided that instead of having just this fence trying to block the fish, they were going to install a 9,000-foot levee, basically a big hill to separate the Great Lakes watershed on this side with the Wabash watershed. So the unique thing is that the Continental Divide used to be 4 miles east along the St. Mary's River, but when they ditched and drained in the late 1800s, they artificially moved the Continental Divide to present-day Eagle Marsh. And so that's why Eagle Marsh became one of the sites to stop the spread of Asian carp right here. And so that's why 25 different federal agencies, state agency, local agencies came together to build this barrier to separate the two watersheds. And it started in 2015, and there was so many pieces of equipment. Equipment got stuck every day, so they had equipment to pull equipment out every day. It was hard work, but we got it done, and now we were able to do that. One thing we did do, so Tony Fleming, amazing, with Don Cunningham and myself, we were able to actually go through and document all the different habitat communities and natural communities in the marsh before putting in that Asian carp berm to watch over time how that was going to change. Because in a restoration, the first thing you do is you do not disturb the soil. The second thing is you don't mess with the water. Well, when we ripped over 60 acres up in the middle of this wetland restoration, it caused lots of changes in our native communities that we had just spent 10 years in this restoration trying to bring back. So the great news is that the Indiana Academy of Science is going to come back in June and do another bio inventory. If you want to, also known as a bio blitz, if you want to come back and help, we are again, after we get this data and this information, we're going to go back and rechart these natural communities and see how that project impacted our wetland restoration. So it was great that Indiana Academy of Science did this BioBlitz back in 2014 to help us give that kind of baseline data before this disturbance. Tons of opportunities for research. And then we kept growing. So Eagle Marsh East, we now have another additional 75 acres. The nice thing is this is pretty much forested and beautiful. It looks like more of an acres land trust site than our wet farm field that we're trying to bring back to habitat. And the cool thing is that the landowner reached out to Acres, and Acres is like, you guys, this is like pretty close to Eagle Marsh. Do you guys want to talk to them? And it took a number of years negotiation, but we were able to secure it. But lots and lots of volunteers have come out killing honeysuckle, spreading seed. One of the great projects we have is our Seed to Marsh program, where we have people of all ages and abilities, and even schools. This is Concordia Lutheran High School, growing plants for the restoration. So we're able to chart from seed to plant going out into the restoration, all the many different hands, classes, nursing homes, whoever is helping us, we're able to kind of chart that seed as it goes from marsh back into the marsh and into our restoration. And then tons of citizen science, folks doing citizen science and acing their awesome science fair projects, to our turtle research, which is important because we are now discussing with the highway how to get an eco passage to protect turtles. And then, of course, our lovely bats. We also have strong community connections. So we also have a Boyd Fire Rescue come out and do trainings on our site. And then, of course, if you don't know Sammy with her Buddy Bench project, it is so cool. But then also a quiet place for art and wonderful things like that. So Eagle Marsh is now 831 acres. And so it's definitely growing. Other properties that Little River Wetlands protect is our Arrowhead Preserves, Buttonbush Bottoms, Eagle Marsh, and then our Little River Landing. We also hold a conservation easement. Something special about Eagle Marsh is that at the time now, Calumet River Project with NIPSCO and a whole bunch of really great partners up in Northwest Indiana now have a much larger urban wetland restoration happening. It's super cool. It's like 2,000 acres. But at the time, Eagle Marsh was something to behold because it was a very large marsh restoration, wetland restoration in a very urban area. And then this is kind of our trail map. Of course, it's open for hiking. Here's our Eagle Marsh East trails, and then this is the bulk of the marsh, sorry. And we also have our Arrowhead has plenty of trails and things like that you can enjoy. Buttonbush Bottoms, I love it because there's this wet area right here, which was a failed ditch, and that's where the Buttonbush is located. And if you want to come out,
Betsy, sorry to interrupt. We're getting close to the end of time, and I wanted to make sure that we have a question from the chat about if there are beavers in the marsh.
oh yeah, so beavers in the marsh, I love it. So there are actually historical records. So the Miami tribe, some members of the Miami tribe actually used to charge people to use the marsh for canoe travel. And so they would collect fees to be able to use it. And there's accounts of them going out and trying to figure out which beaver dams could stay and which ones had to go to keep enough water in the water trails to move people around. And we have that same experience today. So we do thin beaver as needed. But there are some areas where they don't cause problems, and there are some areas they do cause problems. And so that removal is usually where they are causing problems.
We have another question in the chat from Tom. Do you know how many species of plants are found there?
Yes. So Tom, I believe when we did our bio blitz, and good to hear from you. I'm glad you're here today. I think we had 700 and some species found in our bio blitz. 400 I think were native and 300 were introduced. It's something like that. Don't quote me too close on that. I can get you the next time at the Little River office. I can try to download a copy of the BioBlitz report. Actually, I think you can Google it and it can tell you how much. And what's neat is that we did it and to Don Rook, who helped us with that from Ball State. We did it per land management section. And so we have a good detail of what species were in each section of the marsh. Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't think so. If you want to keep on.
Oh, I got another 100 slides. I'm just kidding. There's like 3 more. So Little River Wetlands, it just has so much heart and is supported by the community. We have to celebrate World Wetlands Day. We have wetland trivia at one of our local breweries called Hop River. Hop River hosts our volunteering events once a month. So you can drink beer and plant plants and help. It's great. It's definitely family friendly. We have an Earth Day Fort Wayne where we close down Angle Road and have a big festival. Frogapaloozas are fun gala that we do every year. We have been holding a Monarch Festival since 2011, trying to get, raise awareness of the plight of the monarch, but of all of our pollinators. And if you want to be able to go to Little River and volunteer, I love what they're able to do. You can hit the volunteer link. Oh, here's volunteering right here, which is amazing. Trashy Thursday, weed wrangles, native plant propagation series, volunteer orientation. So there's opportunities all the time to come out and help. There's volunteer application, which is great. And there's a volunteer orientation every second Thursday of the month. So you can get out and help. That's wonderful. Or you can click on the events and click on Breakfast on the Marsh and see what's coming up next. So Little River Wetlands Project is a wonderful project to be involved with. There you go.
So I think that answered probably Avery's question about plans for planting. So anybody who's interested can go to the website to check out the activities and events. So wonderful. Well, Betsy, I can't thank you enough for presenting on this topic. Great as always. Thank you so much. Everybody who attended, thank you for attending today. And keep in mind our next speaker, Greg Munzel, is going to be presenting on how to make tea from native plants. So that should be exciting. That's on February 20th. So circle that on your calendar, and we'll also be reminding you with posts on the Facebook page and newsletter and so on and so forth. So, but thanks everybody. Take care. Stay warm.